Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending. Today we're going to be talking about navigating your church's growth. My name is Brian Kane. I'm a Director of Design at Progressive AE and a principal of our company.
And I'm Adam Hopkins. I'm a Senior Designer at Progressive AE, but I've also had some interesting experiences as a member of my church. I volunteered in a previous church for over 10 years in the youth program, sat on an elder board where we actually hired Progressive at one point to do work before I came to work here. So I've been on your side of the table quite a bit and helped to bring a unique perspective.
Yeah, it was outstanding working with Adam. His smiling face. So today we have, we took a break and we started to reflect on all of our experience, and as we came together and started to aggregate some lessons learned with our engagements in our worship group, we decided to put together a discernment toolkit. And through the lens of a variety of questions that leadership could ask and get prepared as they're looking at growth, potential growth, building new, renovation, is the church meeting your mission? Is it meeting the requirements? Is it enabling? Is it supporting good experience and behavior? So as we started thinking of this discernment toolkit, we started to put it in pretty specific categories. And one category is life cycle, location, capacity, and cost. So our goal today is to take you through the toolkit. We're probably going to run about 45 minutes. We're going to give you a navigation of how this toolkit can be used. And then along the way, we're going to tell stories of how specific items that we discovered using this toolkit informed design approach. So we're hopefully there's some good storytelling. There's also some very simplistic how-to guidelines, and then you can start visualizing how this might be of value to you. So 45 minutes and discussion, and then 15 minutes for question and answers. So for navigation, when you look into the toolkit and you look through the cards, it's laid out in a very simplistic manner. We have the what and the why. So the what is the criteria and research that you would need to discuss along the way before you're taking on a building project. You're looking at present and possibly future locations. And the other part is, it's not just the what, you need to bundle that with the why. Why is it important? How will that inform you? What's important for you to understand? And that allows you to start thinking of it. Is it optimal? Do we need to set priorities? What are our goals? And how does this match our future growth projections and our goal over time? So what we're going to do is we're going to start going through categories, and Adam's going to kick us off and talk about facility lifestyle cycle and how that going through the lens of this category, how it influenced one of our projects. So Adam?
Good. Thank you. And we've got, you'll find in the booklet or the packet, toolkit. If you don't have a toolkit yet, don't worry. At the end of the presentation, we're going to give you a little more information, and we're going to be sending these out. I know some of you have already downloaded the toolkit, but just kind of follow along. So this first life cycle, it talks a little bit, or this packet talks about building systems, the site infrastructure, the quality of the environment that you've got. Another card on building flexibility and adaptability. And today we're going to focus the story for this life cycle portion about not the utilities and some of those specifics, but this story is going to be about navigation on the site, and is your parking, is your approach welcoming to visitors and your members? And then is the overall visual experience of your building a reflection of your mission? So this first slide that we've got up, first image, is Brightmoor Christian Church. And we were asking, you know, they recognize, parking navigation easy? Is it a reflection of your mission? When you, as a viewer, look at this image, you probably respond very similarly to a lot of people. Boy, it looks a lot like a school or an office building. And that was a real issue for them. There's a vibrant church that's associated with this program, but there's very few queues, and site circulation was problematic.
One of the things that it was interesting as we worshiped with them the first time we experienced them is not only trying to navigate the parking lot as Adam was talking, but then finding the main entrance. And then as we experienced their worship presentation and the procession in, the procession out, we also noticed that there was a centerpiece.
More, and the site, you can see they've got a big piece of property, excuse me, and they're right on M5, which is a major road that runs down to Detroit. This is in Michigan. There's quite a bit of exposure, but the building didn't really take advantage of the views from the road. Again, it still kind of gave this perception that it was either a school or an office building. And so that was something that as we started to work with the church, they wanted to really clarify. Another main issue about site circulation is as you approached that front entry point and then drove around to the parking in the back, so much of the parking, as we were kind of illustrating here, you had to drive through the parking, and with their multiple services, when people in the first service would back out, they'd back right out into the traffic of the arriving second service. And so it was a very clumsy site circulation. People would start to perceive that the lot was full and park further and further away. It was just a difficult experience for them. So we're going to start to look then at the next phase of development and how we help solve some of those problems. This is a master plan image that you can see the existing building, and I mentioned the school to the left, and then kind of the renovated space between, and then the new worship center, hub and children's ministry is all new. All the blue is the new areas. So you can see at the bottom of the image, the drive was improved, separating it from the parking so that as people arrived and left, it was simply vehicle circulation and not pedestrians and people pulling in and out of parking spaces. Likewise, this big wall that you see, the arc, started to give an opportunity for the new entry to be visible from M5, created a presence with transparency that allows you to see into the space and allows both people from the freeway and from the site to see it.
And one of the other, as we were talking about what we discovered when we started to worship with them, not only the concentration of people within their lobby where it was pushing people out the front door instead of giving them opportunity to linger, but we talked earlier about the experience of the cross internally. And as we started to engage their leadership and their congregation and understand the meaning and the importance of the symbol of the cross to their community, it started to grow into a presence, and we'll see it more as we go further into the project, but it became an element that was tied into the structure. It was something that you had to walk past under that supported the entry. So it was a time of reflection as you went into the main entrance.
We also tied the structure for the entire entry point right in, when you start to see the imagery, the axial nature from the cross right to the worship center and to the platform itself. So this is an aerial image that starts to, or that reveals how the building is perceived from the site. We've got a very clear point of front entry, circulation has been improved, and obviously the 60-foot cross is a prominent element that can be seen as you're going along. As you arrive on the site and are close up, the activity and life within is revealed, not just what's inside, but that cross is your kind of touchstone on where we're going in. And we've got scripture right as part of that element near the front door.
And the idea of the living room is, again, supporting their mission of opening up, seeing activity, reviewing the activity, but they also wanted to create a familiar style of socialization and fellowship. So it felt more home-like, and in a way of
variety.
In a variety, in a place of you can get an idea of like a dinner table or a living room or a cluster of seating for small groups within a large facility. So again, using the question about navigation, good wayfinding, and does the facility support your mission? That's how it started to inform our design approach. So our next card or next category we're going to crack open is location. And location has a variety of filters. Is it the right context for your mission? Is there an experience of place? Is there an experience of space? And is there good visibility? And is there something that is memorable about your location, facility, and your investment? So what we're going to do today under location is that we're going to look at the idea of what are you known for in your community, and we're going to highlight that, how it informed a design approach, and the idea of is your main entrance intuitive to new visitors. So we're working with this really vibrant Lutheran church here in the Grand Rapids area. And again, when we had the opportunity to worship with them, we started to get the feel of the traditional component and straightforward of the worship environment. It was very axial, Basilican style, but it also had this powerful icon cross tower that could be seen within the community. And as we started to do our congregational workshop, we asked a few questions. One of the questions is, what do you cherish about your existing facility? And one of the answers that came back, or multiple answers that came back, was the powerful symbol of the cross tower. It's a clear symbolic path. And one of the reasons why we started to engage them is that they were transitioning as a congregation. They had a traditional worship experience, and they had a worship experience they called Rejoice. And as part of that, as you can imagine, that the traditional worship took place in their existing facility. So their traditional worship was taking place here, and as you can see, there was a very direct front door. Their Rejoice service was taking place in an area in the back, which is a multi-purpose facility. And the difference was that there was a very clear experience as you entered in traditional, and for Rejoice, you were entering through a back door. And the feedback that we were getting is that there just wasn't equity in experience between traditional and Rejoice. And they wanted to be able to celebrate separate. So the idea is that they wanted the experience with Rejoice to be as equitable as their experience with their traditional.
And they wanted to draw back together as one church, even with two separate worship styles.
Yes, exactly right. And so one of the big drivers, again, through that lens was an equity of experience. So what we've done with them, and we're in the process of finishing up the design documents, is part of our planning. As you can see, the approach is extremely direct. The entrance experience is on the same axes. The view corridor and the memory of the cross tower is present in either experience from going to your Rejoice service or the traditional service. As you're going along the path in Rejoice, not only can you see it as you enter, but you can reflect on it as you pass by it. But most importantly, as we started to bring them together, there was a place where the traditional and Rejoice opened up together, and as they were leaving service, they would have a place for them to be together as one body, one group. Again, further highlighting the idea of respect of the memory and the element that was symbolic and powerful, what they cherished, but also giving a place for them to come together and be equitable, feel like one.
Right. Respected that memory that the community had, but were able to expand to what they needed today.
We're going to stay with location, and Adam's going to take you through this one.
All right. So the topic, the experience of space, really, we're going to talk. We've talked a little bit about your navigation experience for the visitor. This is an example in Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin, that was a major struggle for them, and we experienced that firsthand. So we're going to look at how easy it was or how difficult, and how we can resolve those issues for visitors. So the question is, is it easy to navigate? And we typically go and worship with a church and get to understand who they are and their values, what's important to them. The image that you see on the screen highlights their existing church that they had at the time before we worked with them. And you had two opportunities to enter this building. They had a main parking that was to the north, that you can see the larger arrow. You came in to the north, and most of the people dumped straight into the worship center. If you had children, one of the challenges, you can see this long corridor system. Families would choose to park on the east side, enter through this small entry point, and then drop their children off, and then they would have to navigate up through this entire long pathway. We actually experienced, they were up to 5 services on a weekend. They'd have multiple services Sunday and Saturday night. And one of their biggest challenges was the overlap between services because of this corridor. It could take a half an hour after your service to go collect your children, find your way back out.
We did exactly that. We took the path. We took the path during service, and what we did is we split up, and we call it divide and conquer type of experience, where some of us stayed after in the worship service, because what we were finding is they had the behavior of wanting to come together and socialize. So they would they'd hang out in the worship environment because there was not a lobby. And then Adam actually took the path going to the children's ministry. And as you can see, this path was just a mirror of what I drew earlier. You'd come down, pick up your child, and then you'd have to come. And then you'd have to decide, am I going to stay and linger, or am I going to exit and come out? So this was what we experienced when we first found them. And what we'd like to talk about is how that influenced. There was other drivers, but we're going to go basically from the navigation is how it influenced the design approach.
So this next image, the blue area is all new zones. You can see they expanded quite a bit. We helped them with a new worship center, expanded the children's program with an activity zone It actually has a large tree house in it, a sportsplex that supports their vibrant athletic program and outreach to the community. And then kind of the glue that pulls it all together is that hub and cafe that Brian's outlining right there. It did a number of things. It allowed those major mission program elements to link together. Instead of in this corridor that you're popping off from, it created a zone that both gave you a front door to each one of those ministry areas, but it also linked their east and west parking areas. Now we've got a major front door that's got a car drop-off where vehicles can come in and drop off. We've also got a secondary entry on that side over by the sportsplex that is used throughout the week and also on Sunday mornings. And then on the east side, there's also a significant entry point that allows kind of that equity of space and allows those two groups of people to mix more quickly and see one another. Rather than wonder if a friend came in on a Sunday morning from the west side of the building, you could see and can see all the way across. Here's an image on right at that cafe on the west side. You can see what's revealed. The student ministry is just beyond the cafe. Past the glass in the windows is the point where you connect to the children's program. And then the worship center is on the left. The form and the celebration of that worship center is revealed from every entry point and really gives you an opportunity to connect.
Yeah, the idea of navigation, how we use that also as a driver as we started to lay out the hub that tied everything together. Adam talked about front doors. We wanted to give navigation elements along the path. So when you came to the cafe, it had a presence in the hub. The worship environment is it has a special form. So along your path, you know, there's visual cues of where to enter, where to circulate, and it's good wayfinding. So along this hub, there are icons that take you and help you navigate. The next one we want to go through is capacity, and this one is usually a good driver. Most of the worship clients that we meet with capacity is truly one of the first things that we're discussing, and it could be the growth of a youth ministry, a children's ministry. It could be the growth of their worship environment. So part of what we want to talk about today is not just the programmatic need of capacity, but how do you analyze what you have today? If there is an existing facility, what is the construction method? What you have, is it easy to expand? Is there ability to repurpose? And those are some questions that you could, as a leadership team, you could take on early on and understand what your existing facility is doing for you. So what we're going to do today and under this is that we're going to open up the idea, is the existing facility easy to adapt and incorporate your future growth? And Adam and I, this is a real interesting story with, this is Cornerstone Church in Grand Rapids area. And when we first engaged them and went to their existing facility, there was a couple things we found. They were very vibrant. They were growing. There was great participation, but their church was planned in a very efficient, very compact and very efficient, where they're, and maybe I can sketch it just to give you a simple diagram of what we discovered, because this is important because it influenced where we landed. So when we engaged them, what we found is that they have a simple worship facility, and then along that path, and it was basically, this is what we found, where this was a lobby, this is a worship facility, and all their classrooms and meeting rooms were wrapping around it. And the way it was constructed is most of the walls were bearing. So as you can tell, if their worship facility needed to grow, it was difficult for them to grow. And if they needed more classrooms, it was hard for the walls to move out. You could actually create another pod and link it, but their worship facility was relatively landlocked.
And to compound the problem, they had parking all the way around
it.
So it was like a double stacked donut.
Yeah, exactly right.
So the worship center in the middle.
So as we started and meeting with their leadership, it was and they came to this conclusion without a lot of pushing from us, is that it was the wrong location for them, and they had there was an investment there, but they knew that the investment wasn't going to meet their future, so they made a decision to divest in their existing location and invest in a new location. So what we're going to talk about is the new location, and then specifically the idea of expandability, looking towards the future, how it had an impact on how the design came about, because that was critical. They didn't want to be put in the same position they found themselves when we engaged them. So I guess it's probably obvious of how we planned this, but we started looking at it through the idea of a spine, and a spine that could have activity along the spine. So this could grow to the north, or this could grow to the southeast. And along the path, we had activity space. So along that path, along that journey, there's a kids program, a place, their worship program, and youth and administration. And if any of them would grow, specifically children, they could grow to the north. Youth, that they talked about having a sports program that could grow to the southeast. And what we planned for the worship facility, you can say, well, it doesn't look like the worship facility can grow. It's a simple box. But what we planned is there are some meeting spaces that are part of the entrance experience. The idea is that they could expand by about 100 to 150 people by removing that, and they felt that was a comfortable number. After they would reach that amount, they wouldn't expand on this site. They would plant. So that's very clearly and directly how it started to influence the plan, and you can see it from this aerial of how we placed it on the site. There's growth areas here, and there's growth areas here. One of the reasons why we wanted to show you an aerial is that when we experienced them, we talked about how vibrant they are in the activity on Sunday, but there wasn't a place for them to gather. So along the spine, as we talked about over here, if this is the spine, we highlighted places of activity, but we also created a puddle area along the spine that we're calling a cafe. And when they first started to engage this new facility, what they experienced was that individuals coming to the first service would stay in the hub and wait for the second service to come out so they could have fellowship with their friends. And what you can see is there's a different color on the parking lot, is that we had to start expanding the parking lot for them. Even though we had a generous amount of parking for the size of their facility, even going in with some anticipation, we've expanded it further because of the longevity of the individuals that stay on the site. So from their standpoint, that is outstanding, that they're having individuals from both services linger. And what we're backwards. The spine experiences, this is going to give you a pretty clear idea of how the spine is identified in scale and volume, and then you can see how the collection space of the hub and cafe is an extension of that, but the spine, the directness of that is very clear. So Adam, I think you're going to take them through the card of or the category of cost.
Right, cost and it's interesting, it ties back a little bit to this previous project. Brian mentioned that they divested. Part of the reason they divested is they recognized that their site was in a location that was a fairly prime location, and they were able to sell that and use that as seed money for their new location to better fit their needs.
Yeah.
And so understanding and identifying the value of the property you have, whether it's continuing as the church or changing that function, repurposing it, is makes a lot of sense. And it may not be a church. This next example looks at Grand Rapids First, and we were helping them through the process because adjacent a facility became available. It was a sports complex that the church was able to capitalize on and have a property right adjacent to them where they could develop a children and youth program. So it's really not just the property that you presently own, what's that value, but what are adjacent properties and what are some of those synergies.
Yeah, and one of the things that started to influence the conversation is that since it was a sports complex, it was known in the community more as a center or a community center.
Yep.
So it was a pretty big asset to the community. And what they wanted to do is not just purchase it and take it for their own use. They wanted to have that continuation of an asset to the community, not only for their congregation but to the community.
Right. And so they were able to do that. It was some court facilities, tennis courts, and racket courts and things. So they were able to, as you can see in the images, kind of subdivide that space and really were able to take advantage of the existing structure. The value there for them was tremendous. They were able to move into this facility, renovate it for a fraction of the cost if they were to try and build that from scratch. And now they were able to continue that community outreach.
And exactly, and one of the dynamic ability to transform it.
Yep.
So it could flex from a active worship where it's motor skills and brainstorming and coming together and hospitality, gaga ball, or they could come in and have it a concert venue, and you can see how this space starts to flex and be transformed into more of a community. They could flex from 100 people to close to 500 in short order, so they can ebb and flow and meet the needs of the community and into their congregation. So it was a way of taking embodied energy and having the foresight of how they could repurpose that into something that would continue to be a community asset and also a wonderful venue for their youth ministry in middle school. So I think we're at the end of our storytelling. We are hopeful that you found value in the story and how it had an influence on a design approach, and you could start to visualize how, as leaders within your worship environments, that you could start using the discernment toolkit to engage one another and to analyze not only location, capacity, the building systems, and also evaluating what is the investment and what is the investment worth, and is that investment something that is good to reinvest into or divest into it. So at this point, we're open for questions, and I did see that we had a couple that came up. And go ahead.
Let me mention too, before we get to the questions, if you don't have a toolkit yet, look forward to an email this week. Our team will be sending out digital copies of the toolkit, and so you'll have one in your mailbox shortly. If you don't receive one by the end of the week, make sure you contact us, and we'll ensure that you get one. Just don't want to get it lost in the email system, but sure, we're happy to share that.
Yeah, and Adam, I see the screen is a little closer to you. Can you read the one of our questions?
we're growing and know we need more room, but we also need to raise funds to allow us to expand. How do we figure out how much it's going to take if we don't even know what kind of building we need yet? And then when should we bring in a building professional?
So if we understand the question is, if the question is about what will it take, I'm assuming that the question is regarding around finance and cost.
Combination.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that we would suggest. Not knowing your facilities specifically, we always suggest to do a very good and clear analysis of what you have. We call that a facilities assessment. So what's part of that facilities assessment is looking at the lifespan of your envelope, and what by envelope is what's the condition of the exterior, what's the condition of your roof, what's the condition of your mechanical systems, and the like. So when you start analyzing that, you can start looking at what the cost of maintenance and upgrade, that type of investment might take. And with that, the idea of what will it cost in the long run, that's when you need to engage a professional. And here's the reason why, is a professional is going to help you with spatial needs. We call it, in our profession, we call it a program. Mm-hmm. And the spatial needs is what we start to do is we pull together your ministry teams and identify how you're growing, where you're growing, and what is your future growth projections. And we can do that in a variety of ways. We won't get into the detail of how we can do that, but part of it is looking at attendance demographics, where your aspirations are, what community, and your what are your growth targets, like age group and young adults, the youth, baby boomers, the like. I mean, those are a couple of things that inform program. And then when you get a program, a spatial allocation, that's when you can put a construction cost to square footage. So if you have your facilities assessment, you know what you'll have to invest into your site, your existing building. If you have a program, then you can calculate what you need to invest in new construction or renovation. Without doing any design work specifically, you can do that analysis with the program and facilities assessment.
And those tools, like the facilities assessment, helps you evaluate as you want to expand. Our examples were they were able to open up a wall or change a configuration, and having the facilities assessment help to inform, this roof needs to be replaced. So as we expand here, let's plan on that, or it really helps to make sense of the direction an expansion or a project may go. We've got another question that's popping up. Who should be involved in discussions about growth? I think that's an excellent question.
I think you should, the one reason why I think you should answer that, because you've been on that side of the table working with your church, right, initially of talking about growth. So give some insight on how you feel like that should go.
Well, thank you. You cannot get enough input. It's interesting. We work with an awful lot of churches and understand that all churches have their own unique way of doing things, but pretty much across the board, there's volunteers and there's people that have invested pretty heavily into the program and into the ministries, but they're also very focused on that ministry. They're committed to the church. They are helping to grow the children's program or the Meals on Wheels or an overseas missions program. And they have a fairly good handle on what the needs are of that program or that space. And church leadership often has a broad overview, but may not be as focused on those individual areas that the different volunteers or program leaders are. So really, I guess the question was specifically, who should you involve? As you're doing facilities assessment, getting a broad set of input from all the different groups to understand what their needs are, and then bringing that together is really critical. And
well, not to cut you off, I think what we're discovering 90% of the time where the most success is coming is when ministry leaders and the leadership of the church come together and chart a path that's based on vision and mission. So there is a aspirational, this is who we are, this is where we're headed, alignment. And there's great alignment. And then what Adam is talking about is once the vision is cast and there's alignment, then there's more inclusion of putting together an idea of what is the scale of that growth. And again, then we talked about when we're trying to totally scale that up, that's when you engage professional. Right. But it has to start with the leadership of casting the vision. So the growth is supporting where you're going, and that's charting the path. And then the facility comes along to support that. Right. And it definitely is a leadership casting the vision.
Right. The building, the facility needs to support that mission.
Yeah.
Otherwise, whatever is built may or may not, and it has to be mission driven.
Yeah. Another question that has come up is the idea of, I think it was of course it was the very first project that we talked about, Brightmoor, and of course you and I spent a lot of time talking about the symbolism of the cross and how important that was and how it was knit. The question is how did we decide the location for the cross? So that very direct question. We talked about a little bit of the why, but could you give a little more insight on that, Adam?
Well, the cross itself on that project was, obviously we wanted to make sure it was visible and out at the road, but it also ties into the symbolism of the structure and the organization of the building. One of the things that the church said repeatedly is they wanted to break down barriers to Christ, so that the community could see in. They wanted to be very transparent, but they were drawing people to Christ. And so the organization of the structure, the architecture itself, actually draws to the platform, and on that particular project, there's a Bible embedded at the platform. And the cross itself is part of the structure that holds up that entry point. It's providing protection and welcoming to visitors, the physical protection, but also the spiritual enlightenment.
Because oftentimes, and this isn't a value judgment, but oftentimes they are applied to a building. As Adam highlighted, it's off a radio point from the center of the platform, and it's embedded in the foundation, and it's part of the structure, and it's holding up their entrance experience.
Right. Both symbolically and literally.
Yeah, exactly.
Another question popped up. How do you help churches with fundraising efforts and things like sketches? Drawings are always helpful.
Yeah, we are architects. We like to work with our hands and be very visual. Very good question. Oftentimes, when we engage, we're brought in an early capacity, and that early capacity, we often call it master planning, and we're establishing priorities, design principles, and approach for. And I'd say 50% of the time it's phasing. In fact, we're charting a path for phasing. So to get right to the answer of the question is that when we finish master planning, what we develop, we call it, it's, we do a supportive capital campaign. And there's a variety of levels of support that we give. We usually, depending on the size of the capital campaign, we suggest sometimes to have a capital campaign consultant. And what we add is the messaging of the design approach, the reason why, and of course the reason why is supporting the vision cast, but we're giving a clear reason why of the master plan and why of the design approach. We create three-dimensional images, and they can be in a variety of formats. And again, it depends on the level of need for capital campaign. They can be a freehand sketch, as we call it, so it's a hand sketch, or it can be a computer-generated 3D model that is more photorealistic. We also support doing animation, so we can do a fly-through the interior, the entrance experience, taking you onto the site, coming into the front door, almost like a drone coming into the site, looking at the facility. So it depends on the sophistication, the scale of the capital campaign, but we're definitely there for support. And we're oftentimes asked not only graphically to support it, but help with the messaging. So we feel it's strong. It's really important for the leadership to present the idea and communicate the idea to the congregation. But we usually are alongside in I'll call it, we're the lingerers, that we're set up for questions and answers. So anybody that wants to stop by and ask specific questions, we can answer that. We're more than capable to do the presentation, but we feel in our experience it's stronger when it comes from the leadership and it's in leading that discussion. So very good question, thank you. I feel good. I think this is, I think it's time for us to wrap this up. Again, thank you very much for participating today. We're hopeful that you found good value. There is more information. You can go to our website and download the toolkit. We will be following up with emails, give you some further instructions. If a question arises as you have opportunity to think about what you've heard today and you have specific questions, you can email us directly. That information will be attached to the communication that we send out to the individuals that participated. So we thank you very much, and we enjoyed our time. And Adam, as always,
good work with it.
I loved every second of it, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much.